I never thought I'd find myself standing in the middle of abandoned halls, the wind whispering through broken windows, carrying stories of lives long forgotten. Upstate New York is full of places that time forgot, but they haven't forgotten us. Every creaking floorboard, every shadowed corner, feels alive with the memories of people who once laughed, cried, and sometimes disappeared without a trace. Tonight, I'll take you inside 5 of the most haunted and abandoned places, where history lingers like a chill down your spine, and every step you take feels like you're not entirely alone. If you love exploring haunted and abandoned places with me, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story. 1 Rolling Hills Asylum, East Bethany, Upstate New York. I arrived at Rolling Hills Asylum just as the sun was disappearing behind the horizon. The sky was painted in dull oranges and purples, and a cold wind cut through the trees along the long driveway. From a distance, the asylum looked like any old abandoned building, but as I got closer, I felt a weight pressing down on my chest, like the history of everyone who had lived and died here was still trapped within the walls. Every window reflected the fading light, yet seemed to watch me as I approached. I parked my car and stepped out, my boots crunching on the gravel. The doors were boarded up, but a small side entrance had been left slightly open. I hesitated for a moment, the wind whispering through the cracks like a warning, but curiosity pushed me forward. The air inside was immediately colder, and the silence was so heavy it pressed against my ears. Each step on the old wooden floorboard sounded deafening, echoing through hallways that had seen decades of pain, suffering, and forgotten lives. As I moved down one of the long corridors, the walls seemed to close in. The paint was peeling, and the faint smell of damp and decay filled the air. I could picture patients lying in the old beds, many of them locked away, forgotten by families who never returned. Children, elderly, the mentally ill, stories etched into this building's very structure. I paused in one room, feeling a tightness in my chest as if the room itself was breathing, heavy with memories it refused to let go of. Then I heard it, a faint shuffle, almost like someone dragging their feet across the floor. My heart jumped. I turned sharply, expecting to see a caretaker or a ghostly figure, but the hallway was empty. The sound came again, soft but deliberate, each step echoing in the silence. I reminded myself it could be the building settling, or my imagination, but a cold knot in my stomach told me otherwise. This place was alive in a way I couldn't explain, holding on to the presence of the people who had been trapped here. I wandered into a small patient room. The window was cracked, letting in a thin sliver of moonlight. I ran my fingers over the old, warped bed frame and imagined someone sitting there decades ago, staring blankly at the walls, hoping for someone to hear them, to remember them. My breathing grew shallow, my pulse quickened. Every corner seemed to whisper secrets I wasn't meant to know. I realized then that the true horror of this place was not in ghosts, but in the real human suffering that had taken place here, pain, loneliness, and forgotten lives echoing through time. When I finally stepped back outside, the wind hit me hard, carrying away some of the oppressive weight but leaving a lingering chill in my bones. The asylum loomed behind me, silent yet imposing, as if it had absorbed everything I had felt. Rolling Hills Asylum didn't need supernatural stories to terrify anyone. Its history, its silence, and the memories trapped within the walls were more haunting than anything I could imagine. And I knew, as I drove away, that a part of me would never forget the feeling of standing there, face to face with the echoes of real human lives. 2 Charles Camsell Hospital, Edmonton, Canada. I arrived at the Sagamore Resort just as the last sunlight was slipping behind the mountains. From the driveway, the building looked grand, almost untouched by time, but as I stepped closer, I noticed the cracks in the stonework and the faint moss creeping along the edges. The air smelled of wet wood and the lake nearby, but there was also something heavier, something that pressed on my chest the moment I walked past the front doors. I had been here before in stories, on old postcards, and in whispered legends, but seeing it in person was entirely different. The lobby was vast, silent, and empty. My footsteps echoed across the polished floors, loud enough to make me jump at every sound. It felt strange, as if the resort remembered every party, every laughter, every argument that had ever taken place inside these walls. I imagined children running through these halls decades ago, their joy fading into the shadows now. Even the paintings on the walls, faded and cracked, seemed to watch me, judging or maybe warning me of the secrets I wasn't meant to uncover. I moved down a long hallway toward the guest rooms, each step making the floorboards groan beneath me. The wallpaper had begun peeling, revealing years of neglect and decay. I touched a doorknob on one of the old rooms, feeling the cold metal under my hand. My imagination ran wild. I could almost see a family from the 1920s settling in, laughter echoing, unaware that this place would one day hold silence instead. Then a cold gust of wind brushed past me, sending shivers down my spine. It wasn't just the chill. It was like the building itself exhaled, reminding me that it had absorbed decades of human life. In the dining hall, the grand chandelier hung, slightly tilted, its crystals dull but still catching the last light of day. I could almost hear faint whispers of staff and guests, conversations blending with laughter that had long since vanished. I sat on one of the old chairs for a moment, closing my eyes and letting my mind wander. I could feel the weight of all the lives that had passed through this place, the joy, the sorrow, the fleeting moments that were now ghosts in themselves. Then I heard it, a soft dragging noise, like someone walking carefully behind me. My heart jumped, and I spun around. Nothing. Silence swallowed the hallway again. My mind tried to rationalize it, the wind, loose floorboards, but deep down I knew that the resort held memories stronger than any explanation. Every room, every corridor, every crack in the wood had a story, and it was alive in its own subtle way, whispering to anyone brave enough to listen. As I finally stepped outside, the evening air was cold, but it felt lighter than before. I turned back for one last glance at the Sagamore Resort. The building stood majestic and haunting, a silent witness to the countless lives it had touched. I realized then that the true haunting of this place wasn't from ghosts or spirits, it was the weight of real human stories, the memories that lingered, and the echoes of lives lived long ago, refusing to fade quietly. 3. The Sagamore Resort, Bolton Landing, Upstate New York. I reached Durand Eastman Park just as the sun was disappearing behind the hills. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of the lake and fallen leaves. As I walked along the old trails, a strange feeling settled in my chest, a mix of curiosity and unease. The park looked peaceful at first glance, but the deeper I went, the more I sensed a presence, as if the woods themselves were alive with memories. The winding paths were lined with towering trees whose branches scraped together, making low creaking sounds that echoed like whispers. My footsteps on the gravel seemed unnaturally loud, as though every sound was amplified, warning me that I was not alone. I passed by a broken bench and some old, rusted park signs, and I could almost picture families and children from decades ago, their laughter lingering faintly in the air. Yet beneath the memories of joy, I felt an undercurrent of sorrow, the kind only a place with real history could hold. I wandered toward the old lakeside pavilion. The boards were warped, and dust coated every surface. I stepped inside and paused, letting my eyes adjust to the dim light filtering through shattered windows. I imagined someone sitting here decades ago, staring out at the lake, carrying fears or regrets they couldn't share with the world. The silence pressed in on me, heavy, almost physical, and I realized that the stories of this place were not just echoes, they were alive in the very air I breathed. Then I heard a soft rustling behind me. My heart jumped, and I froze. The wind moved the leaves, but the sound felt deliberate, like footsteps pacing behind me. I turned, but there was no one. My mind tried to rationalize it, animals, branches, maybe imagination, but the chill that ran down my spine told me something about the park was watching, waiting, holding on to its secrets. I continued walking deeper into the forested trails, each step slower than the last, letting the atmosphere sink into me. The shadows stretched and shifted, making me glance over my shoulder repeatedly. The stories I had read about the park, disappearances, strange noises, unexplained sightings, felt suddenly real. I could almost hear faint laughter or whispered conversations drifting from places that no longer existed. By the time I reached the main path again, the last sunlight had vanished, leaving only a pale glow from the moon reflecting on the lake. The park seemed calm once more, almost welcoming, but the tension lingered inside me. Durand Eastman Park didn't need ghosts or legends to feel haunted. Its history, the lives it had held, and the echoes of the past were enough to leave a lasting mark, reminding me that some places remember more than we ever can. For Durand Eastman Park, Rochester, Upstate New York. I arrived at Fort Ontario just as the sky was turning dark, the last light of day glinting off the waters of Lake Ontario. From the road, the fort looked quiet and still, almost inviting, but as I walked closer, I felt the weight of its long history pressing on me. Each stone seemed to hold a secret, every shadow in the walls felt like it had witnessed centuries of fear, hope, and sorrow. I paused for a moment at the gate, my hands gripping the cold iron, trying to prepare myself for what I might find inside. The main entrance was silent. As I stepped onto the old stone floor, my footsteps echoed unnaturally loud in the vast hallways. I could almost hear faint echoes of the soldiers who once patrolled these corridors, their boots heavy on the same stones, their eyes scanning for threats no longer present. The fort had seen wars, fires, and moments of panic and despair, and I could feel the residue of all those emotions hanging in the air. It made the hair on my arms stand up. I wandered deeper, past empty rooms where the air was thick with dust and age. The windows were cracked, letting in slivers of moonlight that highlighted peeling paint and warped wood. I touched a wall and imagined someone from centuries ago running their fingers over the same surface, perhaps seeking comfort or hiding from danger. The quiet was oppressive, and yet alive, as if the fort itself was aware I was there, walking among its memories. Suddenly, a faint creak sounded behind me. My heart jumped, and I spun around. Nothing. Just shadows and silence. My mind tried to reason it, the old wood shifting, maybe an animal, but the cold knot in my stomach told me this place remembered. Every corner seemed to whisper stories of lives lived here, of fears and choices and moments too heavy to leave behind. I moved toward the outer walls and climbed a small stairway to one of the old watchtowers. The wind was stronger here, whipping past my face, carrying with it the scent of the lake and something indefinably old. I looked out over Lake Ontario and imagined the people who had stood here long ago, staring out at the water, waiting, worrying, hoping. Their presence felt tangible, lingering in the breeze, in the cold stone, in the weight of silence. When I finally stepped back outside, the night air hit me sharply. Fort Ontario stood tall behind me, silent and imposing. I realized then that the real haunting of this place wasn't from spirits or legends. It was the history, the lives, and the emotions trapped in every stone, every hallway, every empty room. Standing there, I felt part of that history, even for just a moment, and I knew the memory of it would never leave me. 5 Fort Ontario, Oswego, Upstate New York. I arrived at Doodletown in the late afternoon, the sky painted in shades of gray and orange as the sun sank behind the hills. The road into the town was narrow and overgrown, and I felt a chill run down my spine even though it wasn't particularly cold. As I stepped out of my car, I looked at the remnants of the old buildings scattered across the hill. Some walls were half-standing, others reduced to rubble, yet each one carried a strange weight, a presence that made the air thick with memories of the people who once lived here. I began walking along the dirt path that led past the abandoned homes. Every step I took seemed louder than it should be, echoing off the stones and broken wood. I imagined families decades ago, children running and laughing along the same path, unaware that this town would one day be deserted. The silence of today was deafening, but it wasn't emptiness, it felt alive, as if the town itself was breathing and watching, holding on to the echoes of the past. I entered the ruins of one of the larger houses, its roof collapsed, and floorboards rotted. Dust rose in small clouds as I stepped carefully, the smell of old wood and earth filling my nose. I could almost picture a family sitting in the living room, unaware of the hardships that would force them to leave. Every room had its story, and I felt it pressing against me, almost tangible. The weight of lives lived, dreams made and lost, grief and hope, it all seemed to linger here. Then I heard it, a soft, dragging noise, like footsteps across a floor that shouldn't exist. My heart jumped. I spun around, expecting someone, anything, but there was nothing. The sound came again, faint but deliberate. I froze, feeling my pulse quicken. My mind tried to rationalize it, the wind, maybe an animal, but deep down I knew that Doodletown remembered. Every brick, every splinter of wood held the energy of its past residents, and somehow it reached out to anyone willing to feel it. I moved toward what was left of the old town square. Shadows stretched long across the ruins, and the wind whispered through the empty streets. I could imagine the voices, the chatter, the everyday life that once filled this place, now replaced with silence and memories. It was a haunting, not of ghosts, but of real human stories, the struggles, the laughter, the departures that made the town a memory rather than a home. As I finally left, the sun had completely set, and the sky had turned dark. Doodletown lay behind me, silent yet alive with the weight of its history. I realized that this town didn't need legends to haunt anyone. Its history, the lives it had held, and the stories trapped in every corner were enough to make you feel its presence long after you left. I walked away, my mind echoing with the footsteps and whispers of a town that would never truly be gone.